Gary graduated from college in 1973 from Davis and Elkins, West Virginia. Came home back to Chicago. His father was the president and CEO of the McCormick Place at the time in Chicago. And at that time, Gary really didn't have any direction what career path he was going to take. So his dad suggested, what about the hospitality industry? And Gary thought, well, that sounds good.
Gary always just dove in, took control of it, and it was that tenacity that really made everything successful.
He was also an outstanding fundraiser. When you saw him walking down the hall in a trade show, you'd immediately grab your wallet, but then he'd always get a little bit of something out of you.
He worked in many segments. He was in the cruise industry for a while, in the hotel industry, exposition services, and then destination. The biggest thing was when he was in the cruise industry, he entered the Big Red Boat. It was not the top of the portfolio for the Dial Company. At that time, when he began the company, they were in last place. When he left, they were in first place.
We had been through, almost every hurdle, coming down the stretch to decide on moving the show. And we had one member in particular that was on my board of directors, very involved in the NPE committee side as well. And when we finally, thought we had passed every hurdle, Steve came to me or called me one day and he goes, "Bill, if we move to Orlando, where am I supposed to take my customers? The Golden Corral?" Gary did some amazing things, went to Chicago to take Steve out to dinner, talked to him about the restaurants. Well, they came to our board meeting just several weeks later, and they came in with a menu of all of the restaurants that had been professionally put together, 5-star, 4-star, based on pricing, which ones had the best wine list. And Gary not only did that, but he brought Scott Joseph, who is the #1 food critic in Orlando, to the meeting to meet Steve and talk to our members about what was going on. And the culmination of all of this is we were down in Orlando about 3 or 4 months later after we'd made the decision and things were moving forward. Gary arranged a limo, picked me and Steve and several others up to take us to dinner. Steve thought we were going to Scott Joseph's favorite restaurant. We ended up pulling up in front of a Golden Corral. One of Gary's neighbors actually owned all of the Golden Corrals in Orlando, and so Gary set this up. And so the owner, his wife, and daughter met us outside, took us back into a private room where they had fine china set up, and the rest is kind of history. And the entire plastics industry worldwide knows that story. And that, that to me epitomizes, Gary and the extent that he would go to drive a point home and to overcome an obstacle.
Gary rallied the industry to defend and proactively advocate for itself. He was an inspiration for the Meetings Mean Business Coalition.
He did a lot for the industry. I don't know if he ever realized that or not, but mentored a lot of people. I think he did a lot of game-changing things. He always thought out of the box. He had more of an entrepreneur mind, so I think that's why he probably was so successful doing things. Gary was not a 9-to-5 guy. I mean, I can tell you, he slept with the phone next to him. If something happened in the middle of the night, he was sending emails back, he was answering calls. He really took his job to heart. And when he came home every night, he would say to me, I have heavy shoes, I have to continue to push because there's a lot of people counting on me.
In my opinion, that's really what makes a leader, is someone that's willing to give every bit of information and knowledge that he has to that next generation. And I think that people are going to remember him for decades to come, if not centuries to come, because of the contribution that he did to bring those kids along.
Gary made a personal and professional impact on me. The man was always passionate, was always smiling, very handsome. And I always look forward to spending time with him, either talking about his great family or taking on challenges of the industry.
Gary was authentic, and I think people knew that when he called you, he really wasn't going to take no for an answer. He was going to try to think out of the box and see how you could be a team player and this be a winning situation with him. You have to be a team. In this industry, I'll tell you, when we got married, Gary was on the road all the time, and if you do not have a spouse at home that's in 100% support of you, that makes your job very, very hard. And you cannot be successful in this business if your partner or your wife or your husband does not support you. I met him on the first day of the job. Actually, the funny thing was I worked in the King's Wharf, so I worked catering and also in the restaurant. And I actually waited on Gary that day. 6 weeks later, started dating. He was traveling and in training, so You know, back then there was no email or instant messaging, so we were sending postcards, and you know, I'd wait for my one call a week, that long distance phone call to hear from him. So and about 18 months later, we got married when he was ready to transfer again.
We decided that our colors for 2012 were going to be orange. And so we went out and bought some very expensive ties to kick off our event in Germany 18 months beforehand, where we always kick it off. Started showing up in all of these orange ties, and Gary's like, where'd you get that? And so I sent him one, and we started talking about it. And this whole orange movement just kind of exploded, because he's like, you know what, we should be promoting the fact that we're orange. And it was so cool.
Actually, I think the orange started when plastics came. The orange ties, Gary got scarves for his gals that worked on his staff, and orange ties for the guys. And so this was all starting to lead up to the plastics convention.
Gary was very passionate about the color orange, and anything that he became passionate about, he was successful at. What a great tribute to Gary Sain.
At Gary's funeral, and then at the tribute in Washington, everyone showed up in orange ties.
Gary's legacy is leaving this industry in a far better place than he found it, and encouraging young people to dream and then go for their dreams.
Gary Sain is looking down and smiling at us because he's very proud, mostly of his wife and his family, but of what he's accomplished in the industry, certainly mentored by his father.
When Gary's father died, we had talked about wanting to do something for Frank, so we set up a scholarship at the Rosen School of Hospitality in Frank's memory, and thought that that way we could manage it there from Orlando, and it being the hospitality school was very close to Gary, so it would make sense to keep Frank's memory alive. And that was extremely important to Gary, to have his father's scholarship there. So that's something that's very important to me, is to continue his father's and Gary's.
He's earned his place in the CIC Hall of Leaders by championing the industry beyond Orlando, nationally and internationally, and inspiring all of us to do the same.
And then he said, when I die, how do I want to be remembered? He gave it his best. He had fun doing it. He used humor as an equalizer. He wanted to win the right way. He was honest, truthful, and he led by example. He loved his family, he made a difference, and he treated all equally, and that he did. You only have one life to live. Outside of work and family, give 1/3 to your favorite charity, 1/3 to community service, and 1/3 to a community service organization. It makes you complete. So those were his own words, and I think that's a wonderful way to be remembered, and he really did live each and every aspect of that. We were very blessed to have him for the amount of time we did. It was a gift from God. Not everyone's that lucky. So hopefully he can rest now, and we all say, you know, a neighbor said to me one day, it was really funny, he says, you know, if we start seeing billboards that say, make your next destination heaven, we know Gary's at work.